Greetings, everyone. I'm Mar. Once again, this is my opinion. As you can tell from the title up there, I'm continuing to trek my way through the episodes of Everybody Loves Raymond. And for this, we're on Season 7, Episode 6, Robert Needs Money. This is another one of those episodes I remember seeing in syndication, especially considering this was the more recent season when I started watching. And it's one I've enjoyed a lot, and still definitely watching it on DVD at home I did, and just to preference it from this most recent rewatch, I still enjoyed it. Before I get too far into it, just a reminder, if you want to support the channel, both the Patreon and PayPal links are down below. If you just want to do a one-off support, go the PayPal route. If you want to continuously support the channel and gain access to certain videos early and be able to request topics for future videos, such as Martin Scorsese classics, then subscribe to the Patreon. Either way, your support is appreciated. Now, Robert Needs Money. This is another one from Tom Caltabiano, and you can definitely tell from how this episode goes with the character interactions and the humor. This is one of his episodes. His fingerprints are all over it, mainly because of how Robert and Ray's dynamic are. It's always, you could tell certain writers are involved when their dynamic is like that, even though the actors have chemistry by this point in the show. Now, the basic gist of this episode is that Robert is in need of money because they're cutting back on the hours, and it's getting a lot rough. Now, there's one aspect of this episode that I really find myself having to stretch my suspension of disbelief a little bit, and that is even in the modern world with the whole quote-unquote defund the police, and that is the reason for why Robert needs money. Now, I'll get into that once I get into actually getting down to the crunch, which is right now. The episode begins. Ray and Debra look like they're about to go on a date night. Kids are being taken care of, so they're good. They're about to leave, and Robert comes in. Ray's doing his usual sarcastic thing, like, oh yeah, maybe you can find someone who can do a double date. Well, by the time he gets a date, the movie will be out on video. And they go into it, and Robert's like, yeah, well, the movie's not in my budget right now. And he explains the reason why. And it is because crime's in a 30-year low, and they're cutting back on the hours. There's right there is what I find very hard to believe. Even if crime is in a 30-year low, which I don't really have a big knowledge, to put it nicely, of New York crime at this time, but I believe it was pretty bad in the 80s. If those of you who live in the New York area can correct me on that. Didn't it get cleaned up a bit in the 90s compared to how it was before? So that's like a little bit of a really big low then. But even then, I find it hard to believe that a major metropolitan area like New York City is going to cut down on the hours just because crime is low. I know the negative Nelly's going to go, yeah, then that's going to give the cops a better excuse to actually create crimes and blame it on everybody. Maybe if you go to that negative area, maybe. But just thinking that, yeah, they're going to cut back on the hours just because crime is down. No, you're always going to need policing there. So I find that hard to believe that that is why it's there. I think they just threw that in there to try to create a reason for why he needed it, and it's never really brought up again. You would think something like that would be a major plot thread, but then again, I'm talking about, as I said before, sitcom writing. So it's something's going to be mentioned once and then never mentioned again. Now, once you can get past the preposterous nature of that little plot thread, the rest of the episode is actually pretty fun. Now, Robert mentions because of that, a lot of people are digging into their pensions. Some are having to take a second job. It's rough because he's had to cancel his cable. He's really have to crunch his money and all that. Which now, being on my own, as you can tell from the background, really having to be frugal, I really do feel this part of the episode a lot more, having to budget, having to make do with certain things. Obviously, even before that, I couldn't really afford cable on my own, so that's one thing, like, yeah. Of course, now I got streaming services and, of course, my hard DVDs to keep me entertained. And eventually, if I got to start cutting the streaming services, I already know which ones I'm going to cut. It's in a certain one. Probably get rid of Netflix first if I had to. I like it and has some good shows, but for those ones, I can just get them for a month when those things come, and then just eventually get them on home video, the shows I actually do like. Now, when Ray and Debra are hearing this, they're both reacting similarly yet different. Like, Ray is sitting there like, you couldn't afford basic cable? Like, frick. Whereas Debra, being the person she is, she's really worried about Robert and decides, you know what we need to do? We need to do something nice. We need to loan him some money. And Ray is like, no, 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 no. And this is after Ray gives Robert cookies that their mother made. And he does eat them all on the couch. I just love the way he's eating them. He's like, then at the end, licking the bowl, like, oh, he really hasn't had his sugar rush in a while. Now, of course, Ray reacts the way you would expect when Debra mentions they should loan him some money. And then when she mentions the amount, he's like, $1,000. He just overreacts to it. Now, I get it. It's $1,000 is $1,000. Back here in the early 2000s, $1,000 would stretch a lot more than it would now. And now 1,000 is just a little bit less than what I make per paycheck. I'm not gonna give the exact amount, but I still make more than 1,000. 1,000 is a little bit less than my rent too. But going back into the thing, what this episode seems to forget continuity-wise, more specifically the character of Ray, is, back in season 2, Ray, didn't Robert loan you $1,000 when you took over the checkbook and you made a couple big financial boo-boos, bouncing a couple checks because you paid your card in full, and so he loaned you $1,000 back when he was saving money? So now, when you have the opportunity, even though you've probably repaid that loan in full by now, to pay it, you have a chance to pay it forward and loan Robert money when he needs it. You're gonna go no, and act like that, and be like, I like $1,000. He's your brother, and I do like that Debra pushes that card, and he probably in the back of his head remembers some of this stuff, even though it's not brought up aloud. Maybe I'm just basing that on the way that Ray plays it. Maybe it was brought up in the writer's room and they just decided not to put anything in there to bog down time, or maybe they cut it for pacing and Ray just let it play as subtext in his performance. Maybe I'm just spitballing to think of that, but he decides, yeah, they're going to do it. And of course, Robert, being the person he is, he doesn't want to take it at first. He's like, because I don't know when I'll be able to pay it back. And this next thing is a moment where I really see the brotherly love shine between these two, and that is Ray decides he's going to give it to Robert as a gift, not as a loan. And Robert decides to take it. And of course, when Ray and Debra go across the street the next day and they see the in-laws, of course, they notice that, like, Robert's been a lot more happy and like, what's going on? And when they mention it, they both react differently. Marie reacts like, oh, why didn't he come to me? I'm the mother. He should come to me when he needs money. And of course, Frank is his usual self, like, we'd say no. No, we don't loan money. Which, given how we've seen their characters in the past, is exactly how they would react. Because we all know that Marie has all that money that she's been saving slowly but surely ever since her wedding night and used to pay for the trip to Italy a couple seasons ago. And now she'd definitely be able to loan Robert money if he came to her. And of course, Frank is like, no, 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 we don't need to. And just his reactions when he finds out it's not a loan, it's a gift. Just his Peter Boyle's delivery of, I stand corrected. It's a perfect way to continue the episode there. Now, the next little thing occurs once Robert gets there. And he's all happy and bubbly. And he mentions that he's going on vacation. Frank, you can already imagine, is going to have a field day with that. And Debra and Ray are like, what? And when he comes back out and they confront him about it, they mention that it's because his life is stressful and he needs a vacation. And they go back and forth. It's a big old thing until Ray decides to throw the gauntlet down with it. And he tells Robert, I gave you that money because you're my brother. You take that money and you go to Vegas with it, you're not my brother. And the look on Brad Garrett's face as Robert in this scene really sells, like, the et tu, Brute? How well then, before he leaves. And we see from how Frank is as a character why he would not want to loan people money. He does give a little insight into it, even though it does go off into a joke that you would expect Frank to make. And apparently that is he lost a friend over loaning money. So you could think, yeah, subtextually he doesn't want to loan money anymore. And I'm not going to spoil the joke for those of you who haven't seen the episode, but definitely fits Frank, but there's a nice little bit of subtext there. We're going to get some more insight into his psychology in the next couple seasons. I think it's beginning of season 9 when we get a good one, and that's going to tie back into his parenting strategy, so I'm going to save that for then. Now, Ray does follow Robert to his apartment. They talk, and we really get to see just how bad things are getting for him. The bologna and the orange juice in his fridge. And Ray does apologize, and they get into a whole conversation about, you need to use that money to live, but I need to go. I need a vacation. It's a nice little back and forth between the brothers. I'm not going to give it note for note here, but it's a nice little moment. If I were to do a top 10 of the moments between the brothers in the show, this would definitely be on that list. If it wasn't, it'd be in the big honorable mentioned one, because I don't have every big moment right there on the list in front of me. And the way that they end this argument, and they're like, why don't we go together? Yeah, the Barone brothers on the strip. And Robert goes through everything that they could find in Vegas, and I just love Ray's reaction, and Romano plays this scene very perfectly. We're going to need another 1,000. Now, of course, you expect, probably didn't end up happening. And the epilogue for this episode kind of shows it when he throws the idea at Debra. She shoots it down, but I just love the way she shoots it down. It's very Vegas-y, and I'm not going to spoil the wording for those who haven't seen the episode, because it is the perfect little for this episode. Like I said at the top, once you can get past that one little weird thing involving Robert's job as a police officer, this episode is pretty fun, even though it also disregards the fact that Ray did previously borrow money from Robert, so he should be returning the favor. Those are my only two little with the episode. But other than that, this is as close to a perfect episode as you could find, especially this far into the show. I mean, they have the formula by this point. And if I remember correctly, I've said seasons 3 through 6 are the high point as a whole. Here, season 7, you can still see they're riding high from a creative and acting standpoint. And this is one of the episodes that shows why. And definitely is going to be on my favorites of the season and on that VHS list I've been talking about. And definitely, if you're going to show somebody a random episode from this season, this is definitely one to show them. And now the next episode, if there's an episode from this season that's usually on the skip list, it'll be this. I don't even remember the last time I watched this one. Probably the last time I marathon watched the show. And we're going to see with this recent rewatch if this is going to still be on the skip list, or it's going to be like a couple of the other ones where I have actually started to enjoy it a lot more since then. And of course, that is going to be The Sigh. Till next time, guys.